Hello everyone, my name is Kevin Kamps with Beyond Nuclear, and as Linda introduced me, I do the radioactive waste work at Beyond Nuclear. And I've been asked to talk about our Freeze Our Fukushimas campaign that Beyond Nuclear launched in early to mid-April. This is an emergency enforcement petition to the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the agency which is supposed to protect public health and safety, the environment in the United States. But as my friends and colleagues from Japan have said about Japan, much the same, almost exactly the same can be said here in the United States. This agency is a rogue agency. It's very complicit with the industry it's supposed to regulate. And so we go in with our eyes open about this emergency enforcement petition. In fact, in the decades-long existence of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, there have been many such petitions brought by anti-nuclear and environmental groups, concerned citizens, about the risks at their nuclear power plants, all of which have died on the grapevine because the Nuclear Regulatory Commission rejects them again and again. There has been very rarely any positive progress due to these petitions that take so much work. But we launched this petition in the aftermath of Fukushima to call attention to the 23 atomic reactors in the United States that are of the exact same design. General Electric boiling water reactors of the Mark I design. Some of the most controversial, Linda mentioned Vermont Yankee, and the scandal that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and I believe it was on the 3 Mile Island meltdown anniversary actually, that the NRC as an agency would approve 20 more years at this 40-year-old atomic reactor, which is massively leaking radioactivity into the groundwater and the soil and eventually the Connecticut River from underground pipes that the company's executives told the state of Vermont under oath did not exist. So that's one of these reactors. Other famous ones, or infamous ones I should say, would be Oyster Creek in New Jersey, the oldest operating reactor in the United States, now 42 years old, which 1 week or less after the NRC granted it another 20 years, announced to the world that it was having a large-scale tritium release, radioactive hydrogen, into the groundwater, into the aquifer below, into Oyster Creek, which flows into Barnegat Bay, a very productive, biologically diverse body of water, which happens to be very shallow and very small. And here's an incredible fact about Barnegat Bay and Oyster Creek atomic reactor. Every 6 weeks, because Oyster Creek saved money when it was built 42 years ago, and did not build a cooling tower, every 6 weeks, the entirety of Barnegat Bay is sucked through the Oyster Creek atomic reactor for cooling water purposes, killing unimaginable amounts of sea life in microscopic form, the early life stages of fish and other aquatic life, but also killing megafauna, fish themselves that are sucked into the plant through this massive flow of water. To give you an idea how big it is, it's about a square mile, well, it's a smaller reactor. It's pushing a square mile of Barnegat Bay to a depth of 10 feet or more on a daily basis. That's what gets sucked through the plant. That's another one that is an identical twin to Fukushima Daiichi. Yet another, the largest GE BWR Mark I in the world is Fermi 2 in Michigan. As with Oyster Creek, as with Vermont Yankee, Fermi 2, because it has operated for decades and does not, at Fermi 2, yet have dry cask storage, outdoor storage in silos, which has its own problems for high-level radioactive waste. At each of these plants I just mentioned, over 500 tons of high-level radioactive waste in the storage pool at Fermi 2, which is more than the waste in units 1, 2, 3, and 4 at Fukushima Daiichi combined in the high-level radioactive waste storage pools. So there's a few examples of these plants. Another one I could mention, because it's not so far from here, is Millstone Unit 1 in Connecticut, which has been shut down since the mid-1990s because of major safety problems they were having, including with the high-level radioactive waste storage pools at that plant, which led to criminal charges and actually convictions at Millstone. Thanks to a whistleblower, the world found out about this in the first place, who was made to pay a very heavy price for his whistleblowing. Millstone Unit 1 has been shut down since the mid-1990s, and its pool remains full with all the waste that that plant ever generated. All this time later, why? because the company doesn't want to spend the money, some tens of millions of dollars at most, which they make that kind of money in days or weeks in profits from electricity sales at these facilities. That waste has stayed in the pool at risk of a catastrophic accident all this time just to save that relatively small amount of money for this company. So those are some examples. The emergency enforcement petition calls attention to the reactor risks, the containment risks with these facilities, as well as the high-level radioactive waste storage risks. We had our initial meeting with the Petition Review Board in early June. This is an NRC body, and we broke a record for public interest. We had, at that point, already many hundreds of co-petitioners, many of whom phoned in to the meeting. And by doing so, by flooding the phone lines at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, prevented the NRC regional offices, which are the local headquarters of the NRC for each region of the country, from calling in. They called in too late. The public had already called in and flooded the phone lines. So the agency had to call a suspension to the proceeding that day to allow time enough to get more phone lines freed up so that the regional offices could phone in. The NRC didn't care that the public couldn't get in. They had to have their regional offices there for legal purposes. That's the only reason they did that. So we're about to have our second meeting of the Petition Review Board on October 7th at 10 in the morning. You could still sign up as a co-petitioner at our website, which is right there, beyondnuclear.org. On our homepage, you can sign up as an official co-petitioner. We now have over 5,000 co-petitioners, both individuals and organizations, signed on. We'll have, as we did in June, we'll have a number of the grassroots groups that live in the shadows of these facilities speaking on the record, the official record, to these NRC decision makers, explaining the reactor risks, the high-level radioactive waste storage risks. And I'll just close by saying that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has established a task force for learning the lessons from Fukushima. It issued its near-term report in the middle of July, and incredibly, a majority of the NRC Commission, the 5 directors of the agency, by a 3-2 vote, voted to take their sweet time in implementing even the recommendations of their own task force, which called for a whole spectrum of safety regulation upgrades at nuclear power plants. And we actually had some agreement from our emergency enforcement petition and the task force. They said that there need to be safety upgrades on high-level radioactive waste storage pools. They said there needs to be a makeup water supply, so if the water boils away from the heat of the waste in an accident, it can be replaced. We would say that's just the most basic of things. You also need emergency power supplies on the pool to prevent the boiling in the first place. They didn't call for that, but we're calling for that. We have also called for gauges to be added to the pools. It's incredible that the regulations don't require temperature gauges on the pools. They don't know the temperature of the pool water. Water level gauges, they don't know if there's water leaking or boiling away from the pools. Not required under regulations. So we've called for all these things. On the containment, which was dramatically destroyed at Fukushima Daiichi on live television, NHK Broadcasting televising live the large-scale hydrogen explosions, first at Unit 1. The Unit 2 explosion happened within the primary containment structure, so the external building looks more intact, but the primary containment structure was severely damaged in the first days, creating pathways for the melted-down cores of Unit 2 to escape into the external environment, actually. Unit 3's explosion was the most dramatic of all. Very large-scale hydrogen explosion. If you see images from recently, flyovers by drones, because it's such high radiation fields that human pilots would receive a dangerous radiation dose from flying over. It's a pile of rubble at Unit 3. That's all that's left. What condition the reactor pressure vessel is in, what condition the pool is in, is anybody's guess. Unfortunately, Tokyo Electric Power Company controls most of the flow of information. Unit 4 suffered an explosion that to this day remains a mystery. Nobody knows, officially or unofficially, why Unit 4 exploded. Unit 4 was not an operating reactor. Its fuel had been removed from the core before this disaster struck into the pool. In the early days of this catastrophe, from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the belief was that the pool at Unit 4, containing the most waste of all, had boiled the waste had caught on fire and the hydrogen gas generated had exploded and causing damage to the secondary containment building. But now they have backpedaled. Even as early as May, they were backpedaling because images released by Tokyo Electric showed that the pool was largely intact. The fuel was largely intact. There was some debris from the explosion in the pool. But the new theory is that Unit 3 caused Unit 4's explosion. The two units share a venting system that shares a smokestack, so to speak, that the hydrogen gas was supposed to be released to the atmosphere through. Well, that sure didn't work at Unit 3. And apparently, the hydrogen gas generated at Unit 3 flowed through this common system into Unit 4 and exploded. That's the theory, anyway. And so incredibly, not only the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has declared the storage of high-level radioactive waste in pools, and dry casks for that matter, to be safe and secure, not just presently, but for 120 years, perhaps 300 years on site. An incredible, absurd statement that they call the nuclear waste confidence decision. Everything's fine, we're confident. In addition, the U.S. Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future, in charge of dealing with the high-level radioactive waste mountain that's 70 years high in this country, they have said the same thing in late July. There are no problems with the safety or security of pool storage or dry cask storage in the United States. Well, the dramatic television footage of helicopters in Japan desperately trying to drop water into these pools that were boiling dry, fire trucks from faraway regions of Japan trying to pour water from a distance into the pools because the radioactivity levels were so high, the firefighters could not approach without receiving dangerous doses of radiation. Ironically, crowd control riot control water cannons being used to fire water from a distance, and other ad hoc means. Obviously, there are safety problems with high-level radioactive waste storage in pools, and we have them here in the United States. We could have a Fukushima-like accident any day at any of these 23 GE BWR Mark 1s, but we are not saying that the Mark 2s and the Mark 3s and the pressurized water reactors are safe. That's not what we're saying at all. We're beginning our campaign focused on identical twins to Fukushima Daiichi. After that, we will move to close the Mark 2s, which are very similar in design, the Mark 3s, which are very similar in design, then move on to the pressurized water reactors like Indian Point. I went at Eileen Miyoko Smith's invitation to Japan in August of 2010, and my first stop on the speaking tour was Fukushima Daiichi. And I met beautiful people. I met the mayors of those towns, and as was said by Mrs. Sato, it's a very beautiful place except for these nuclear plants that are marring the landscape. Even then, one little known fact about Fukushima Daini, 7 miles to the south of Fukushima Daiichi, is that it survived this catastrophe by a single off-site power line, 4 operating reactors. That the tsunami hit, wiped out the emergency diesel generators because of a single off-site power line that survived the earthquake. This reactor catastrophe was not twice as nightmarish as it currently is. And that whole place that I visited that was so beautiful, the beautiful people, is now a dead zone that will probably be uninhabitable forever, just like at Chernobyl. And all of these reactors in the United States and Canada, which has the CANDUs, Canadian natural uranium deuterium reactors, also very dangerous reactor designs, need to be shut down. 104 operating reactors in the United States, another 24 in Canada. North America needs to be a nuclear-free zone. That, as was said, is the lesson from Fukushima. Thank you.